What is up, everybody? We got some good stuff to talk about today. In fact, I have two good pieces of information. The first is that I had my son on Wednesday of this week, so I've got a wonderful little 2-day-old sitting right next to me on his little pillow while I'm recording this video. So if I start getting quiet for some reason, it's because I'm trying not to be too loud for this 2-day-old. Second piece of information is yesterday, the kind, wonderful, amazing folks at the Double Burst podcast released a spoiler video for the new Defenders team pack that's coming out later this year. So I thought it would be fun to hop on, pump out a video talking about what I think about the cards and the set as a whole. And if you'd like to watch the video that the Double Burst podcast guys put out showing all the cards, I'll put a link to that in the description below. Alright, so the first character that we have in this set is a character that popped up in the Doctor Strange team pack. This is Clea. She's got 3 versions, just like every other card in this set has 3 versions. This first version is called Mistress of the Dark Dimension. It is a 6-cost Bolt character. All of them have the Defenders affiliation, which makes sense because they're all Defenders, and this is the Defenders team pack. She's got a 1/6 foresight, a 2/6/6, and a 3/7/7, and her ability states that while Clea is active, deal 1 damage to your opponent whenever they field a Bolt or a Mask character die. This card is okay. If you're running up against a lot of ring teams, this card is actually pretty cool. It is 6 though, so it's kind of expensive to get. It's got great stats for a 6 cost. The 3 fielding cost on its top side though is a little high. As I mentioned though, with most of the ring teams being either Bolt or Mask, this card is great for punishing that. So I could see why they would want to print it, and I could see how you could put this on a team just in case you're running up against that. You could make this an early buy in those early first 3 turns if you're running up against a ring team and really punish some of the pressure that they like to put on with their characters. Her next version is on Stranger Tides. This one's also a 6 cost with the same stat line obviously, and her ability says while Doctor Strange is active, Clea cannot be damaged. Now the thing about this card is, looking at all the Doctor Stranges from this set, from the team pack, spoiler alert, there's some in this set, from the team pack before this and from the original AVX, they're all pretty expensive characters. All of them range from the 6 to the 7 cost, meaning that I would have to buy a 6 cost or 7 cost Doctor Strange and also a 6 cost Clea just for her not to be able to be damaged. Now that's a cool ability, but I'm not too terribly worried about her being damaged because she has such a good stat line. Her becoming damaged usually doesn't mean she's going to immediately get knocked out. All that being said, I would love to see this ability on some other characters, especially lower cost characters that hinge on you having a higher cost character. So something that was like 3 purchase cost, that was hinging on a 6 purchase cost or a 5 purchase cost being out would be super cool. So I like that they have at least this on the brain, and I'd love to see them do this with some other cards. And Clea's final version is also a 6 drop. It says, while Clea is active when you assign blockers, you may declare target character die blocked without assigning it a blocker. This is a really cool ability, and something that makes this card actually fairly easily run because this can both act as a finisher, a big damage dealer at her 7/7 side, but also act as a huge blocker because she can both block something and not get KO'd, most likely, and she can also say, that die is blocked, even if I don't have to assign a blocker. So she basically acts as something that can double block characters and only take damage from one. So this is a really cool character. This is probably the one that I would mess around with the most. I'd put on some teams and see if it makes sense as a 6 cost. Okay, the next character we have to talk about is Doctor Strange. This is the first of his 3 copies. This one's called Book of Vishanti. And this is a 7-cost shield character, again with the Defenders affiliation. It's nice to see another Doctor Strange. I actually really enjoy the character himself. So he's appeared in the AVX and then in his own team pack. I was underwhelmed with the cards in his team pack, so let's take a look at these. First of all, he's got a 1/5/5, a 2/6/7, and a 2/8/9, so some really good stats. He's always got a good stat line, so this is, I guess, more continuation of that. His ability says, while Doctor Strange is active, whenever you use a non-continuous action die, create a copy of its effect. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this opens up a lot of really cool things. I think we've had an ability like this one before. In fact, the similar ability was on Red Dragon, the super rare version from the first D&D set. I think this ability complements his stat line very well, and I think if you can get him out and then purchase up a couple of maybe some overcrush givers, then this really fits him. Maybe some anger issues, or what was the replacement for anger issues now in this modern age. Toss one of those on him and another character because of his ability, and you've got some lethal damage right there. So in my opinion, a very good finisher. His next version is called Shields of the Seraphim. It's a 6-cost version, and it says, while Doctor Strange is active, when you use an action die, you may put it in your bag at the end of the turn instead of in the used pile. I like this one as well, and I like the ability to cycle certain things. In fact, I like this one for Ramp a lot. Ramp is really, really good for this because it just keeps moving through your bag and popping out and moving through your bag as well. It reminds me of the Scarlet Witch ability that says pay 1 when you use an action die and move it to your prep instead of your used. Except with this, you don't actually have to pay that energy, you just use the ability and it's just built in on the card. Alright, the final Doctor Strange card is a 7-cost The Doctor is In. His ability says, while Doctor Strange is active, whenever you or character dice you control are damaged, you may move an action die from your used to your prep. I like the little combo here where you could damage yourself or one of your characters after purchasing a die and then prepping it over that way. That way you don't actually have to pay to rip Hunter's Chalkboard it over. All you have to do there is attack with one of your characters, have it get damaged, and then prep over that die. Unfortunately, I don't see this one being used as much as the other two. The other two are good finishers or just good all-around characters stat-wise. But because this one is a 7-cost with an ability that is a little harder to trigger, I probably would not see many people using this. Next up, we have Hellcat. She's a 3-cost mask. This version is called Demon's Sight for Sore Eyes. Her stat line is a 1-2-3, a 1-3-3, and a 1-4-4. Not bad for a 3-cost, but there are better. While Hellcat is active, your opponent must pay 1 energy more to purchase basic action dice. I don't see this one being used a lot. I could see some people saying run this card to avoid your opponent buying up your momentum dice, but the thing about that is that they're 1-cost dice already. So your opponent's probably just going to buy those early before you even get the opportunity to get Hellcat out on the board to raise those prices. So overall, there's not a lot of utility in this right now. Now, if the meta changes to where there's a ton of basic actions that are really doing a lot of damage, then I could see this being useful. But again, it's one of those things where if that's the case, then they'll probably buy that stuff early when they see that you're running a Hellcat. So who knows if you can actually get this out or if it can have a ton of value, especially on that stat line. Her second variant is called Hell's Bells. It's also a 3-cost mask. This card says, when fielded, name a die replacing all previous choices. Your opponent cannot purchase that die next turn. So I like this ability a lot more. I think this one definitely could be used. And I like that it's a when fielded ability, meaning you can KO her with something like Fabricate to rotate that back again, re-rolling her next turn, allowing you to name her over and over and over again, ad nauseum, forever. This is probably the only card in this entire set that I would consider running a 4 of, though most competitive decks don't actually run 4 dice for Dwarf Wizard, which has a similar ability triggered to this. So I could definitely see you getting away with using just 2 of this die rather than 4. Her final card is called It's Patsy. This is again a 3-cost, and this one says, when fielded, name target opposing non-sidekick character die, replacing all previous choices. When Hellcat is active, deal 2 damage to your opponent the first time they field that character die. Another really cool ability, one that punishes someone playing a bunch of a certain character. This is definitely one that punishes someone running swarm dice or other low-cost characters that you really want to get a lot out of. This also could hurt ring teams, so this is a really great card. Moving right along, we have Hulk making his return to Dice Masters. This card is called All the Rage, and he is a 7-cost shield character. His stat line is 146, 267, and a 388. Not as good as some Hulks in the past. Actually, it's very similar to the stat line from his AVX days, except that 4.6 I think was a 5.6, 6.6. I can't remember. Maybe it's exact. I don't know. His ability, though, says, while Hulk is active, whenever one of your character dice is KO'd, deal 1 damage to your opponent. This is a pretty cool ability and one that encourages you to put together a team of cards that maybe KO themselves, or even a heavy Fabricate team. This could maybe go on to that and ping out a bunch of life from your opponent. That'd be really cool. Obviously, it would be hard to get early, so you'd have to kind of get to it, then do all the Fabricate shenaniganry, and then, hope to kill your opponent with it. Outside of a combo team that sort of builds around it, this is just a good die to have out as a blocker and as an attacker, because anytime your opponent has to attack into this, they have to worry about you blocking with something that's going to get KO'd and them taking damage for it. Plus, he's just got a good stat line, so he's not going to get KO'd. That's sort of a theme I've seen with this set, is that they have good stat lines and that they're all kind of high cost. So this is really a set of finishers. Hulk's next iteration is called Banner's Not Home. This one's also a 7-cost shield character. This one says, whenever Hulk is dealt combat damage, deal damage equal to his attack to another target opposing character die. I don't know if I like this one as much because it puts the stipulation of combat damage on him and it just deals it to a different opposing character die, but that's nice that you can basically KO 2 characters when you attack with him, also when you block with him, so he does act as a good attacker and blocker in that sense. As a 7-cost, not necessarily as strong of a card as I would like. Doesn't exactly do a ton of finishing, which is probably what you're looking for in a 7-cost. So overall, I kind of like the first one better. The last Hulk character we have is called Emerald Dawn. It's a 7-cost shield as the others were. This one says when Hulk attacks, you may pay a shield. If you do, Hulk cannot be blocked by fewer than 2 character dice, meaning he has to be double blocked if they want to block him. That's nice, and it makes this a really aggressive variant of this character. I still think I like the first one overall because it has just more flexibility. This one's sort of locked into aggression. The last one's locked into defense. The first one has sort of both mixed in. So 3 interesting cards, but I think I'd take that first one over the other 2. Next up, we have Iron Fist. This is a 5-cost mask version of him called Healing Hands. His stat line is an 033, a 144, and a 264. And his ability says that during the attack step, if you have Mask in your reserve pool, Iron Fist gets plus 2A. So looking at his stat line again, he's actually an 053, a 164, and a 284. So a really similar stat line to the old Wolverine from the AVX set. And overall, a really powerful card. For 5, you can kind of make it work. You can get multiples of them, most likely. But his stat line with a mask in your reserve pool really makes this card worthwhile. His next variant is also a 5-cost. It says Holding Back the Storm, and his ability says as long as you have not fielded any character dice this turn, he gets plus 3 attack. So that makes him an 063, a 174, and a 294, which is really, really powerful. But again, that only triggers for the very first one of these Iron Fists. So if you have multiple, you're only getting buffed on that first one because you fielded a character once you fielded that first one, so he doesn't get that buff over and over and over again. So I don't like this one as much just because it only applies for one, whereas the first one can apply to every Iron Fist that you have. As long as you've got a mask, you're good to go. And rounding out Iron Fist, we have a third 5-cost, and this one's called Pulling the Punches. When Iron Fist attacks, deal 1 damage to each opposing sidekick. While Iron Fist is active, your opponent is dealt 1 damage for each sidekick KO'd by this effect. An important thing to note with this card is that allies are considered sidekicks in the field, so you could conceivably KO a couple of allies with this, and this could see some play if ally teams become really, really big. There are a few ally buffers, and there are, with these past 2 sets, some allies that are worthwhile to play. So allies could become a thing, and this could see play as a counteraction to that. Other than that, though, I don't think this has enough value to be played, and your stat line is probably not strong enough for a 6 or a 5-cost to make this worthwhile if you're not running up against a lot of teams within your local meta that run allies. Coming up next is Jessica Jones. She is a 5-cost fist character with a 142, a 162, and a 263 stat line. So a pretty poor defense stat line overall. This variant is called Ladies' Night, and her ability says Jessica Jones gets +1/+1 whenever one of your character dice is targeted by a global or character ability. Now, it doesn't say that your opponent has to target them, so if you put a team together with a bunch of globals that target and benefit your characters, then you could conceivably buff this up really, really strong. Even just 2 globals activated on your characters or even 2 character abilities activated on your characters. Gets you a 6/4, a 8/4, and an 8/5. So you could get some value out of this card. Next one up is Jessica Jones Mother of the Year Award. This is a 5-cost fist as well. And it says, whenever Jessica Jones deals combat damage and is not KO'd, draw a die from your bag and add it to your prep area. So nice little ramp. But for 5, I'm kind of expecting more than just a single die ramp. So I would probably look elsewhere if I was looking for this ability. There are cards that have this ability that are cheaper as well. So the stat line doesn't really benefit your choice to ramp 1 die. There are a lot of cards and dice out there that will KO her, so her ability won't necessarily trigger every time. So I'm not a big fan of this card. And last but not least, we have Jessica Jones Redeemed, another 5-cost. This one says Jessica Jones cannot be targeted by opposing global or character abilities. So maybe I spoke too soon when I said last but not least, because this one I probably would put least out of the 3 Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones has not had a good showing in Dice Masters, as a lot of her cards are pretty mediocre at best, and some of them even just plain bad. This one's not bad in that it keeps itself safe from abilities, but she's got such a low stat line on really all of her iterations from all the different sets that she can't really do too much without getting KO'd in combat. The second to last character in the set, and one that was actually a bit of a surprise to me and a bunch of other people who didn't really expect this card to be in the set, is Loki. This is a 6-cost Bolt character. This one's called Master of Delusion. He's got the villain affiliation. I spoke too soon earlier when I said all of them had the Defenders affiliation. This one is a villain. He's got a 1/2/5, a 2/3/6, and a 2/4/7 stat line. When fielded, name an energy type, replacing all previous choices. While Loki is active, dice of that energy type cost 1 more to purchase and to field. This is great against ring teams. It's great against mono teams, anything that's running 1 type of energy. It reminds me a lot of Jinzo from the Yu-Gi-Oh set in the sense that it's a 6-cost and you get it out there. Keep your opponent from doing one specific thing really, really well, and that's kind of what this does. Might be worth running, especially if you do run against a lot of ring teams. This would be great to have out there. Fits well onto other villain archetypes as well, so you put this out there with a bunch of other villains and it could do some work. The next one has a great subtitle. This one's Paper Throne. It's another 6-cost bolt. It says, when fielded, gain control of target character die with a level lower than Loki until the end of turn. Return that character die to your opponent's field zone at the end of the turn. I don't like this card as much. The stat line is not worth the 6 cost. The stealing ability of a character is very similar to the Scarecrow that came in the World's Finest set. Unfortunately for Loki, that Scarecrow cost half the cost of Loki. So it's almost just worth running one of those cards instead of Loki here. Too bad, because I love that subtitle, Paper Throne. That's so evocative. Loki's third version is called Sibling Rivalry. This one's a 5-cost. And it says, while Loki blocks or is blocked, all character dice blocking or blocked by Loki lose their character abilities until the end of the turn. It's a nice text wiping tool, but for 5, there are better text wiping tools out there. So overall, Loki kind of hits me with a thud on this set. Doesn't really jump out and do much to me. That first one's probably the best, but other than that, I don't really see the other 2 panning out very well. Last up, we have Luke Cage. This is a 5-cost fist character with a 1/2/5, a 1/3/6, and a 2/6/6 stat line. This is a great little subtitle. If you've seen the Luke Cage TV show on Netflix, it's always forward. His ability says, while Luke Cage is active, other Defenders characters' dice get +1/+1. It would be really nice if he buffed himself, because his stat line is pretty low those first 2 sides. But he doesn't, so it is what it is. A 5-cost version buffing all of these other cards that are also really expensive, probably not going to pan out too well, so I don't really put this high on my list of things I want to try. And it buffs cards that are already really powerful overall, and only +1/+1 doesn't make much difference when you're running something that has an 8/9 stat line already. Next up, we got Harlem Raised, 5-cost again. It says, if Luke Cage is blocked, you may re-roll him. If you rolled a character face, he gains Overcrush. Otherwise, move this die to the field zone at level 1. It's really cool because it avoids KOing in a lot of cases. This brings up some interesting timing questions and also a couple of questions about what happens when he rolls on certain faces. In general, this feels like a double-edged sword. And rounding out the entirety of the team pack, we have Luke Cage Street Sweeper. Sweeper, another 5 cost. This one says, while Luke Cage is active, other Defender's characters cost 1 less to purchase. Whenever you field another Defender character die, draw a die from your bag and add it to your prep area. This card is actually really, really great, especially because all of these cards are super expensive. 6 and 7 cost variants. This card, being a 5 cost, which is fairly easy to purchase in the game, makes a 6 cost a 5 cost, which is, again, fairly easy to purchase in this game. So you could actually run a really strong team if you buy this card. You could run a couple of these big quote-unquote finisher cards on a team and actually be able to get to a few of them over the course of a game if you manage your energy right. So very cool, and I think worth running, worth putting onto a team with maybe 1 or 2 other defenders and giving it a shot, because some of these cards are just so powerful, both stat lines and character card abilities. I'm definitely looking forward to trying this one out. So looking at the set as a whole, I am extremely excited about this team pack. There are some critically powerful cards in this set, some things that I think could really be powerful meta-defining finishers and control cards, some really, really fun stuff that I really want to get my hands on and mess around with. The other thing I like about this team pack is that it's full of cards that don't actually require you to run 4 dice. With a set full of finishers, you actually can just buy one of these and run with just 2 dice. You're pretty much good for that. You're not going to buy too many. You're not going to buy 3 or 4 of each of these characters because they run 5 costs and up, right? There's only Hellcat in the set that costs 3, and like I said when I was talking about Hellcat, she could be run 4 of, or she could actually make it as a 2 of. So it's really cool that you don't have to buy 4 of, like perhaps with that last set, the last team pack. So what about you? What are some cards that stick out in your mind? Which of these cards do you like the most? Which do you like the least? Which do you think are going to be extremely good and meta-defining, as I said? Do you plan on buying 2 of these? Or are you just going to pick up one like I'm going to do? Sound off in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching.